Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Richard Wee. Welcome to RWC Community Webinar. Today we are hosting Dr. Lau about the Metaverse. A bit of background for RWC. We have been conducting this series of community webinar as far back as 2019, but at the time it was known as a seminar where we held it at our bungalow in PJ. And as we all know, our behavioral patterns have changed since the year 2020. If I had invited you to join me for this webinar in 2019, you probably tell me, huh? No teh tarik? So now here we are having this webinar, and the best thing about webinars is I could speak to my friend in Brunel at this moment live. You know, this would have been impossible 3 years ago. So if you are like to check out our webinars, please go to our YouTube page, RWC YouTube page. Plenty of webinar. Hi, Simon. Nice to see you, Simon.
Hi, Simon.
Yep. So unfortunately, it's mute for security reasons. It's mute. So those who we like to check out, especially Pinyan's interview with us on a few other topics like gene editing, artificial intelligence. These are topics which we discussed here. Today is Metaverse. It's all on RWC YouTube page. And of course, you can also find it on our Facebook page. We've got about 100 over videos there. And we're quite pleased to know that our videos have been viewed, I think, more than 30,000 times in total. So not bad for a law firm. Now with me today, before I go to the start of the show, Dr. Lau is a fellow partner of RWC, Darren Lai. He's the head of litigation of the firm, and he is also our human resource partner. Darren?
Hi, Richard. Hi, everybody. Hi, good afternoon if you're in Malaysia, and good morning if you're in the UK or anywhere else in the world. So hi, my name is Darren Lai, partner at Richard Wee Chambers. So I'm not a speaker or a moderator for this topic today. So we'll be hearing mostly from Dr. Lau and Richard moderating this session. But it's always interesting, although I'm primarily in dispute resolution, we always need to keep abreast of what are the new laws coming up. So that's about it from me. So I'm pretty much learning.
Thanks, Darren. Welcome aboard. Always good to have all our partners. There's only 2 of us, so all our partners on board. Yeah, talk as if our firm with 10 partners. Only 2 of us. Yeah. So welcome to the webinar. Now, today's topic, before I go to the start of the show, is about the Metaverse. We're going to speak about what is this Metaverse. Some of you feel like we are now in a movie show called Matrix or some augmented reality, and you're not far from there actually. And then on Thursday, 2 nights ago, we had a sneak peek interview with Pinyan for about half an hour. And in that interview, a few other friends of mine asked Pinyan the same thing. Aren't we in Matrix? So she's going to answer that. So number 1, what is a Metaverse? And then we will discuss about, since we're all lawyers here, what are the legal parameters of the Metaverse. We will be sharing an article written by Dr. Lau shortly on the screen. You feel free to go and visit that website and read her article. On a small mini shout out from RWC, inspired by Pinyan's article, we then went on to append our version of article. You can also see RWC's version of article to see what Metaverse and the law is about. Now, without further ado, I would like to first bring Dr. Lau on board for her to introduce herself. I will then pose some questions to her, and then we'll take our interview from there. And Darren, anytime you feel you would like to join in, just join in. Right?
Sure, will do.
So, Pinyan, good morning to you, UK. I hope you had your coffee already.
Thank you.
So, okay. Maybe you can like to introduce yourself to everybody here and those who are watching us on Facebook.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm so used to saying good morning. Good afternoon to most of you, I suppose. My name is Pin Lian, and I'm a lecturer in biolaw here in Brunel University, London. And my research area has always been into legal frameworks or governance of new and emerging technologies. And particularly my focus has been on gene editing and artificial intelligence. But, this metaverse thing is pretty new. Well, I say new in the sense of how it's exploded into mainstream sort of cultures over the last couple of years, although technically it's not really that new. So very happy to be here, and always very happy to be a collaborator with Richard Lee's Chambers and with friends and colleagues back home in Malaysia. Very happy to see that I've got colleagues, former colleagues as well, Mr. Simon Wood from University Malaya. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
I'd like to also shout out to, I see CT here. Hi CT. CT is head of legal in Mui Group. Thank you very much for supporting our talk, and many others here. Thank you for joining us. So with that in mind, let's dive into it. It's already we've taken up. I have taken up 10 minutes of the time. So Pins, Metaverse. Recently, the world's biggest social media page last year excitedly announced that they are going to call themselves the Metaverse. And that, I think, shook the attention of people around the world. People think that, oh, no, Metaverse is new. Actually, Metaverse has been around. Metaverse has been around for quite some time, yeah. But of course, when Facebook do something, everybody get excited and they think, oh, it's new. Actually, it's not new. What is the Metaverse, Pins? All yours.
Yeah, well, basically, I think that it might differ according to who you ask, right? There is no agreed definition, although there are some agreed characteristics as to what the metaverse is. But I think roughly we can think of it as some sort of virtual digital world, right? Beyond corporeal earth, okay? That has digital twins, and that where our digital twins can interact, places, things, sort of a new version of an internet where you can sort of gather and even do business, have education, etc., etc. Yeah. So that's what I think would be one of the simplest definitions of what the metaverse is, right? Of course, the more technical people will be able to give us different versions of how it actually is, how it works, and how NFTs are actually the living force that flows through the metaverse and allows these kinds of transactions to carry out and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do feel, Pins, that the NFT, which we just did a webinar a few months ago on NFT, and that was highly received. But we respect, I think many people don't realize what is it about. It's all about, oh, they hear money, people will get involved. Let's be frank, but it's not just about, So NFT is one
it's just
of
one.
the,
it's just one of the
one
aspects.
of the, correct. So if let's say if you're talking about ingredients in a cake, and the cake is metaverse, then NFT is just one ingredient in that cake, So anyway, what about this? Like in your article I just shared just now, you mentioned the phrase augmented reality, virtual reality. I'll share it again. Would you like to expand on that further?
Yeah, well, basically, I think what's quite novel is, look, augmented reality and virtual reality are not new concepts, not new phenomena at all, right? It's been around for a long time. And it's primarily predominant, as normal people are basically, we don't really use augmented reality unless you are probably gaming or in some kind of simulation, right? Augmented reality and virtual reality, so the technologies and gadgets, also accessibility of these tools, which might be peculiar to certain industries. And also, I think they're pretty expensive, right? The thing about how these tools can work is to exemplify and to sort of heighten, I would say, your experience in the metaverse, because it becomes very much part of your virtual reality at that point of time, right? So let's think of it as in 2D and 3D in that sense, you know what I mean? And also some of these tools now are so significantly advanced that most of them are haptic, where so if you're interacting in a space as an avatar in the metaverse, for instance, you would be able to feel if another avatar bumps into you, you are able to touch items and things like that, so-called give that sense of physicality and sort of feel to what you're experiencing.
Correct.
Yeah.
I must confess, and I think Darren will share this sentiment that my only closest to expertise in augmented reality and virtual reality is what we watch on the movies.
Yeah.
And personally, because as you know, we do advice on esports. So
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, before the lockdown, I actually went to this studio to put on this huge head mask, right, with a big goggle,
Yeah.
and I was transferred into another world where I was like any other augmented reality games. I was battling, shooting, and in this case, a monster, real big monster, and I was running around in a small square box. I was sweating, and then when I took off, I was just still at the same place, But in that AR, I actually traveled a galaxy to battle with that monster. So is that an example of a metaverse?
Well, I suppose the metaverse is slightly different, but I suppose because this is a gaming platform, right? So, but the metaverse is different from that because it's,
yes,
well, I would say, I guess it's a different platform as well. You know what I mean? And
a bigger one.
And I think we are looking at the metaverse right now, or at least our knowledge of the metaverse right now is starting in the way that we have viewed the internet. And how people were like, oh my God, Y2K, are things going to happen? When the internet was exploding, right, in the 90s, and people were, oh, wow, this is something completely new. And I think this is sort of where we are with the metaverse as well. And, trying to navigate all these new issues, new concerns, right? And basically adapting to these sorts of technologies that can both enrich and also can be misused as well, right? With all kinds of technologies, as with all kinds,
Now, before we go into the legal questions, Pins, I want to put forward another recent news I read. And when I say recent, I'm talking about the last 6 months. That a fairly large football club from UK, they have announced that they want to build a stadium in this metaverse. And then a fairly large sports brand have announced that they're going to build a few shops in the metaverse on the assumption that people like you and me, we're going to put on our goggles, go into this metaverse, and then walk into the shop and acquire the products from there. Yep. Do you have any comments about that, Pins? I mean, maybe you want to expand on that phenomenon?
I think it would be, okay, so just from the positive aspects, I think it provides access in ways that you literally mentioned at the very beginning of this webinar, that we are having conversations with each other. I think the pandemic has forced us to adapt in this way, for one, right? But in terms of the metaverse, for instance, people who would not have had the opportunity to travel for whatever reason, make a flight of 14 hours, 15 hours from KL to Manchester, right? To be able to go and watch a live football match. People who maybe have anxieties and cannot be around huge crowds of people, right? Now have the opportunity to invest in, I think, maybe for I suppose the general, we're talking about, I suppose, the M40s, right? Okay.
Yes.
Available to access technologies that can be affordably bought. And then you sit down in your living room couch, you buy a ticket to the event, you put on your goggles, your VR equipment, and you're there in the stadium watching a live football match. So in this way, this actually gives us a glimpse into how businesses and industries, different sectors like education and healthcare, etc., all can also benefit and can sort of transform in the future. We're talking about things like real estate, even that's being traded and sold in the metaverse. And when I say metaverse in this context, I mean like the different virtual worlds that are set up by different organizations and companies, things like that, right? So while I think it's highly fascinating, it is important as well. And I guess we can't help it. We're lawyers, right? We can't help but think, what are the user terms and conditions? What would protect me as a user if I go into this space? Is there a possibility that anything could happen to me? Because the reality is that even if you're wearing your haptic devices, it would be as if you were actually there. Richard, you mentioned you're sweating and everything during the, playing that game. I've seen hilarious videos on YouTube and TikTok where the older generation, like boomer generation, people trying to use the AR and VR equipment, and then like literally jumping on the TV and breaking the TV or something. So yeah, I mean it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment, but I think it would definitely be very, very interesting. Which also brings me to the second thing. Sorry, a bit long. The second thing is accessibility.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, accessibility, because whilst at the moment we're all here, we all have Zoom, which means that we're all okay. We all have a laptop, a smartphone, etc., access to internet, right? Half the world still does not have that. There's a huge global digital divide, right? So as with any kinds of technologies, I think one of the things I'm always concerned about is the access that's going to be afforded to parts of the world, or to entireties of communities and things like this, right? We want to make sure that essentially technologies are not concentrated in the hands of powerful elites, although at this point of time, it looks like the huge tech giants are the ones with the means to be building this space, which is a good thing. We need that as a start, right? But along the way, which is where I think our conversation comes in, about governance, about laws, about user terms and conditions, about making this an equitable sort of technology that can be accessed by as many people as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well done. Well said. Yeah. Well said. Actually, there's one part you said we are all lawyers. Many people.
Most of us are.
Non-lawyers won't understand this, but lawyers are naturally trained to see the worst possible scenario, and then that's our job. To think of the worst possible scenario and find a solution towards the correct position. So when I see this metaverse, I see so many things that can go wrong, and that was why it attracted me to reach out to you when I saw your article. The funny thing was, when I read your article, actually a few weeks before that, I was just speaking in a firm about having to go to metaverse, and we were all struggling to find information. There's no law books, of course, for sure, to understand this topic, and we don't know who to approach. Just like sports law 12 years ago, esports, I always find myself figuring out how to solve this problem. So now this is another new area for us to how to resolve this. Now, I like the part where you mentioned about being equitable, accessible. That will come a bit later. But when it comes to law, you hit the spot on the word governance.
Yeah.
So I'm figuring out, right? Let's say if we have a Metaverse Malaysia, right? And knowing Malaysia, because we love politics so much, I think the first people to go into the Metaverse will be the political party. They probably want to put their political party in the Metaverse, so that when we go in, they're like, oh, support me. But that aside, how do you see the future of governance of Metaverse? Do you apply current, I call it current laws to the Metaverse? Or do we need to, which I think the answer will be yes, do we need to modify the current laws to cater for what is happening or may happen in the metaverse? All your spins, and I will share your article as you speak.
Yeah, I think it's as lawyers, I would say yes, because we always talk about governance, and governance being the tool by which we ensure that chaos does not ensue, right? Sorry, putting it in a very bleak way. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so every time we talk about the governance issue, for us, it is definitely a big thing, right? And how I foresee it is that I guess the first question is whether or not in the very first place our laws can apply, right? Because we are talking about a space that is literally boundless. I think a big question in my mind is jurisdiction, right? And applicable laws, because if you're in the US, obviously the US laws apply. And of course, in Europe, the whole of GDPR applies, and the GDPR also applies beyond Europe, for instance. So in this way, we can see how the applicability of laws have their reach, right? But the difficulty is I can't see this in the metaverse, or maybe I'm not well equipped enough to see how this can apply to the metaverse. And also from my understanding, we don't have one shared metaverse. And right now, what we're seeing are individual virtual worlds, let's say set up by one, Snoop Dogg, one set up by Meta. Meta's got like Horizon Worlds, Horizon Venue, right? There's Decentraland, which is set up by Sotheby's, right? There is Nike's metaverse. There's so basically you're looking at interconnected but different and separate virtual worlds, right? So that's it's not, and each of these are a metaverse in themselves. So logically speaking, I think each of these would currently be governed according to the laws that establish these organizations, I think. So I would also say that likely that they have their own user terms and conditions, just like when you go to any website, there are user terms and conditions. And I think that's how these spaces are currently governed.
Will be
yeah.
Pins.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, sorry, but the issue, I guess, arises as to the standards of these terms and conditions. Do they meet internationally accepted standards that protect people and also foster good business practices, etc., corporate governance, all these? Does corporate governance apply in this space, right? User responsibility, operator responsibility, things like this. So it sounds like we're just very doomsday kind of people, but I think it's important to think about the implications of this, because half the time, a lot of us are blindly walking around accepting terms and conditions on our smartphone, right? I think this was also a conversation we had in our last few webinars, Richard, right?
AI one.
Yeah. And so the same issues will actually persist when it comes to data protection, privacy issues, etc., right? And with this space, because it's such a novel for us right now in that sense, do we need to think about alternative situations where certain things happen that maybe happen differently in the real world, for instance? So yeah, just sort of my yeah.
Maybe Pins, I mean, I as usual, I'm putting on my cap as a teacher, trying to explain to people how this would be. I think because there are going to be quite a number of metaverse, right? A lot of private metaverses. And I think I look at metaverse from the Malaysian point of view, private condominiums. So every condominium have your own rules and regulation. And as you know, Malaysia, we have strata title laws. Where and each condominium has their own management, their own rules. You know, they can pass their own rules. So I foresee metaverse, if it is privately run, will be like that, because every company will run their own metaverse. But if one day metaverse becomes nationalized means it will be controlled by the government, right? So there will only be one metaverse for that country, for example, right?
Maybe,
Then I would see that, then the law will be national laws, right? So it depends which way we're going to go. Whether for Malaysia, I can't speak for UK or
Yeah,
Thailand or Sweden, wherever, but for Malaysia, if our government does not intervene and does not nationalize metaverse, which means it becomes a privatized project
yeah.
like condominium. As you know, condominiums in Malaysia is privately owned. Then it will become, we need to pass laws to allow each metaverse to self-regulate, um, but still using general laws. For example, criminal affairs. We spoke about this the other night on Thursday. Pins, for example, I have a mens rea to
Yeah.
murder, but I conducted the murder in real life, but my mens rea was in the metaverse, or the other way around. If I have the intention to kill, but I kill the other person's
Avatar.
avatar, yeah, in the metaverse, how does the law apply? How does a penal code apply? So that's how I see it. Do you think I'm on the right track,
I
Pins?
think partially yes, but also I think we've got to think about the fact that, okay, I think realistically now we do have these separate private virtual worlds, right? Which is how the metaverse has sort of presented itself to us, lah, right? But also, for instance, when the internet first came, when I say came around, uh, we started seeing ways in which people started interacting. So do you, in that sense, do you only tell people, let's say living in Malaysia, that you can only access the Malaysia metaverse, for instance? How can you stop people from going to other metaverses or other virtual worlds? Just like right now, you cannot stop me from going on any website I want to, obviously, unless there are certain reasons why certain websites are blocked in certain countries, right? So like for instance, in many parts of Europe, you can't even log into torrent websites, for instance, just as an example, right?
Yes, they
And you
block
cannot,
it. They block it
yeah,
already.
it's blocked. So I think that it's going to be similar for the metaverse. And when it comes down, the thing is, when it always comes down to government intervention, which is where we feel, there's always this need for balancing exercise, right? To allow enough liberties for people to have access and to use these spaces in the ways that would fully benefit them and make them happy. Like, it's about autonomy, right? You know what I mean? But at the same time, also
Yeah,
protecting
yeah.
protecting and blocking certain things that you hope that it should not be there. Like, for instance, like I've given you the example of blocking torrent sites because it's a violation of infringement of IP rights, for instance. So I guess it would be things like that. Yeah, I think it's the thing is, it becomes even more complicated when we think about, for instance, the way criminal laws apply in common law countries, but may not be the same in civil law countries. So it begs the question of, do we actually have universally accepted principles of law that we can all rely on? And if so, does that come down again to conventions, to treaties, etc.? So the issues that we're seeing in real world situations, whether or not you've signed and ratified a treaty, that applies also, I think, in the metaverse. Because if your notion of universality of human rights or legal principles is not the same as mine by virtue of different legal systems, for example, then we need to negotiate these universality principles. Yeah.
So I tell you what, Pins, I love the parameters that you're setting up. It's so wide. We can end up talking about this for hours. Yeah. But I'm going to try and bring us back down to Earth before we travel too far away from the metaverse. And like you said, Pins, I remember what you told me. One day we're going to have this webinar in the metaverse.
Yeah, and we're all
two of us.
And everyone here, we are literally going to be represented by our avatars. We can interact with each other. We can have a coffee break or whatever, where we actually go to a fake table, a virtual table with virtual coffee and virtual curry pop and all these kinds of things.
Yeah,
It's
that'll
a
be
different
interesting.
level. It's a different level of interaction. I'm not saying that it's so different from what we already have now on Zoom, but it would be significantly different because it might sort of feel like you're actually there. And I think this is definitely something very
Mm.
interesting, and this is something that I would love to explore in part of my work, part of my research, but more for the educational purposes and how I would love to deliver classes to my students in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
okay,
yeah,
now fantastic. Let's look at your article. So there are 3 points you raised in the article.
yeah,
First, these are 3 areas which you mentioned. So let's expand on that so that uh, the delegates here get to hear the views of the writer herself. So the first one is about the boundless marketplace, where you talk
yeah,
about NFTs. I will shrink back the scene, don't worry.
yeah,
And then the next one is where we talk about data. So you see data here. I think everybody can see the word data. I think that's the obvious issue, data.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
third one is about user interaction.
yeah.
So let's expand this. I'm going to make you into a teacher, and you can, you know, start the class. What do you think about this? A boundless marketplace, data, and the interaction. All your spins. What are you trying to
Okay,
convey here?
let me deal with this marketplace thing first lah. Basically, it comes down
Mm.
to doing business lah in the metaverse, right? Or in whichever virtual world you decide that you want to go in. And
Mm.
your currency here is cryptocurrency, and in this particular instance, it's called the NFTs, right? And I
Mm.
think we all sort of have this idea what NFT is. It's basically digital asset, right? And
Mm.
the reason why NFTs have now become such a hype word is that through I would say through extremely fantastic branding and of course talent and stuff like that, these NFTs can basically embed things like art and music, other sort of creative works, and then basically you can just go and sell it lah, right? In that sense. So
Mm.
Richard, for instance,
Mm.
you could write a guidebook on, say, esports in Malaysia, convert it into make it an NFT and sell it in the metaverse, and people who are interested will buy it lah. In that sense, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's become such a huge thing because people are buying all kinds of NFTs that come down to like cute pictures of bears, even like music albums, right? Art, and the huge thing was this auction house Christie sold a piece of NFT artwork by a digital artist for 69.3 million.
Crazy.
Right? And you've got like indie rock bands like Kings of Leon who released their album as an NFT with special perks that are not available if you stream it, if you buy it, or stream it on Spotify, or if you buy it on Apple Music, or if you buy an actual CD, right? Okay. And many artists have already started using NFTs as a way to start selling their creative work, right? So when you think about it, oh yeah, and of course you got like child millionaires, children who start, there's this one guy who takes selfies every day for I don't know how long, and then start selling them as a collection, became a millionaire. A kid who starts drawing stuff, he draws these series of little whales, right? And he names them, and it becomes a series, and he's a millionaire, right? I'm trying to ask my daughter to leverage on her artistic talents. No, she doesn't want to. So, I mean, obviously, it's not going to be as simple. It doesn't mean that every single one of us who creates an NFT is going to be successful. I think it comes down to so much more than just creating the stuff and thinking, if I put it out there, people will buy it, I'll be a millionaire. No, it's just like business lah, right? You have to brand yourselves. You have to have a product that people really want. I mean, I think the business people who are in this space or even listening to this right now would probably know much, much better than I am, right? And what's exciting is that each of these NFTs of a digital asset, right, has a special unique identifier. So in that sense, you're buying something that's unique to you, although that same product may assign a different unique identifier number to another person, lah, right? So since this exploded, everybody's like, wow, okay, so there's a lot we can do in this space, right? you've got Microsoft. You guys used Microsoft Teams before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You've got Microsoft now coming out with something called Microsoft Mesh this year, which is basically a sort of crossover between Microsoft Teams and the metaverse, and maybe personalizing the space, the workspace much more, right? Using avatars and stuff like that. You've got real estate. So these are just different sectors of businesses that are booming in the metaverse. Buying a condominium in the metaverse, Snoop Dogg's metaverse, which is called Snoopverse, well, very original. You know, a piece of virtual land there costs 500,000 USD. Right? Can you build a house there? Yeah, you can. For instance,
Crazy.
So it's basically a hype bubble that's been growing, right? And everybody is thinking of the perceived value of NFTs and wanting to leverage on this, right? It's like if you bought a Chanel bag in 2005 and sold that Chanel bag right now, you would actually be making money because it is an investment. So this comes down to NFTs being investments. And I think one of the things is whether or not it's a sustainable investment in the future, right? So basically, when I talk about marketplace, this is just one of those things that I mean. And also, if you talk about NFTs and you can say right? Let's say you have a NFT creator who is already very popular and is going to release a new series of NFTs, right? And said, like, for instance, okay, Monday, I'm going to release my new series of NFTs that sneak peek has to do with tigers, right? And people who are actually collecting these NFTs would be eagerly awaiting the launch of these new NFTs. So one of the things I thought about is, could this be similar to something like share issuance on public stock exchange platforms? Could it be something like an IPO, or where you know that a company is going to go public and is going to offer its shares, right? And this prompted me to think about whether or not we could even think about IPO type situations in the context of NFTs, because in IPOs, we've got strict legal requirements, we've got listing requirements, we've got compliance with banking and securities legislation, we've got a whole bunch of things and requirements that need to be in place before an IPO. With an NFT, basically, I guess the idea is you keep issuing only lah, right? NFTs, if you're an innovator, if you're a creator, which is fantastic, right? How do we deal with taxation mechanisms? How do we deal with transparency? If somebody leaks, and let's say Meta comes up with a new NFT, and somebody from the organization leaks the NFT, and what's going to happen? There's such thing as insider trading in this kind of thing. So I'm sorry if it's very overwhelming, but when I say marketplace, these are just some of the things that I thought about. And the other thing about marketplace also I thought about is like the dark web. You've got Silk Road last time in the dark web. Basically dealing with contraband, guns, weapons, etc., allegedly murder for hire, child pornography, trafficking, you see, right? And whether or not these kinds of things are likely to be replicated in the metaverse as well. So when I say a boundless marketplace, this is sort of what I'm thinking about. And I know it is very bleak. And I've been told directly as well, after I wrote this article, I've had people telling me, wow, you are really a damper on creators and innovators. And yeah, use your fake laws in a fake world, using fake money to hire fake lawyers and have fake judges. Essentially, I was told that. And I was like, well, that's your opinion, which is also fine, right? So to some people, this kind of thinking is ridiculous and over worrisome in the sense. Yeah.
But then it's our job to think about it, isn't it?
I mean, I guess we've been, I hate to use the word, we've been programmed this way in a way, right? We've been conditioned to think it this way. It's the training that we've had as lawyers in this sense, right? To always be able to see what legal consequences are, even if people don't just see it. And I hope that this is the way that we begin dialogues about how this type of a space can be used equitably, coming back to equitable use and fairness, right? And safety, yeah.
But talking about safety, we will now slide into the safety of data.
Yeah.
So I think data is a massive issue. With all our footprint all over, data footprint all over the internet world. How do you see the metaverse complementing, or will it be overwhelming, or will it even ignore the entire laws of data? What do you think?
I think it can't. It can't, because right now, if different organizations are creating different metaverses or different virtual worlds, right? These organizations, depending on where they are established, and I think most of them are currently in the US, right, would be subject to their own US laws about establishment of these companies, right? And I think that this would logically apply data protection legislation from these jurisdictions into their separate metaverses. I guess this is where the line is a bit blurred. I'm just assuming this at this point of time, right? But hopefully, there is some form of data protection. It is one of the biggest things of our century, I would say also, right? With the GDPR and with the way digital technologies have permeated our lives and how we use our smartphones in everyday living situations, right? So personal data is constantly being generated and being processed, and within the metaverse space, I think it's no different as well. It could likely produce new categories of personal data that will be used for processing. And if it does, then I, as a data user, as a user, would like to know how my data is going to be used and how it's going to be processed. Do I have options if I do not want my, say, avatars, presentation, gestures to be used as data, right? I mean, and then of course, when you think about putting on equipment and stuff like that, like certain, like you said, you were sweating when you were wearing this equipment, Richard, right?
Yeah, man, running around within a small room, yeah.
So the thing is, right, some of these equipments, I guess, depending on how terror the technology is or that particular VR or gadget is, it can measure biometric information, heart rate, SpO2 rate, things like these, right? And these kinds of information are all private information as well. It's personal data, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, so when you think about it, there's going to be a huge, I cannot say how huge, but a lot of personal data that might be collected. And even thinking about new categories of personal data that could be created, we are already willing participants right now to our data being processed through smartphones, through websites, blah, blah, blah. And all these gives companies insights into our preferences, right? It seems like very innocuous information, but like the same thing happens on a smartphone where I get, in Instagram, I always get advertisements about properties around my area, new condominiums and stuff like that. And the other thing I get a lot of is perfume and makeup. So it's very clever, right? So when you think about metaverse, right? Let's say there's this fantastic example that's given by this lawyers at the law firm Reed Smith, and they call this the Hungry Avatar, right? Where if you are in the metaverse, your avatar looks at a restaurant or a display of food and things that they like to eat and stuff like that. Some of the facial expressions of these avatars can be captured, right? And just like how our facial expressions can be read when we are, at a restaurant eating our favorite food, or when we are in the shop and we see an item that really piques our interest, right? And when you see something that you don't like, the face is like, right? For instance. So
Yeah.
all these little gestures can be captured in the metaverse as well. That becomes our personal information. And companies, and companies can use these data to sort of then come round again to tailoring algorithms and tailoring advertisements that target you, knowing that these are these are things that you like, right? So yeah, especially when you're logged in for a specific period of time.
So that's why I think,
I
suppose it's important that the laws on data must apply in the metaverse to protect our data. It must apply.
That's definitely my thing as well. Yeah.
They must find a way, even if it's difficult, they have to find a way to go around it. And the last one in your article is about the interaction of our avatars at the metaverse. So here you suggested, if I can just read out very quickly, you mentioned about the possibility of under criminal law, negligence, and imagine one assaulting another. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you seem to have frozen on my screen, and I can't hear you now. I don't know whether it's my internet or not. I don't know.
It's a bit bad. I think it's also my internet, because I just got the message. Can you hear me now?
Okay, now I can. Yeah.
It's a bit. Okay, go on. Yeah, I will share screen. Maybe you want to expand on the topic.
Oh, okay. Sorry, what was your question? Sorry, what was your question, Richard? Because I couldn't hear just now about the.
Yeah, sorry. I think the internet dropped for a while. Malaysian internet is like that. So I think that the issue of what user interaction on issues of negligence and criminal events, your avatar in the metaverse, that is a real problem. You want to expand on that?
Yeah. Okay. So I will first start by saying that when we interact in a space, whether in reality or not, right, we would like to think that, it's all in good faith lah, right? Okay. So if I go to a conference on, say, constitutional law and human rights, etc., in real life, I do not expect to be assaulted or whatever lah, right? But if I am, for whatever reason, we know that there are laws that protect me. What if you attend a conference or an event in the metaverse and your avatar is assaulted? And then I started thinking, wow, can this apply? Can we apply criminal law here? Can we apply assault and battery? And as you have rightly said, at least for us in common law jurisdictions, there's always this question of actus reus and mens rea, right? And when you talk about the space itself, right, but the physicality is on your avatar and not on you. So is your avatar an extension of your legal personality, or does your avatar need to be given a separate legal personality? Which I know sounds like a crazy thing, right? Because if we talk about giving legal personalities to avatars, this raises a whole bunch of different issues. I think Kenny raised the other day, identities of avatar, It becomes very, very convoluted lah. But basically, I want to know, for instance, there have been already so many cases of sexual harassment on the metaverse, right? I've outlined a few incidents of sexual harassment, groping, because these are people who are wearing haptic vests and things like that, so they can actually feel, right? And one woman was surrounded by a bunch of avatars that were basically jostling her in one of the metaverses, right? You've got a woman who was being groped. You've got women who have been approached by stranger avatars saying lewd things to them. So the sexual harassment that is experienced in this space is no less real than sexual harassment that is experienced in the real world. The trauma is real. The victims are real. The next question is, how are our laws going to deal with this? Whose responsibility is it to ensure that people behave properly in the metaverse, right? Again, like I bring you back to how initially I said that I think this would all be user terms and conditions and policies, right? Definitely there would be policies in place, but these basically tell us that the policies are not strong enough. There is no enforcement. What are we going to do about these types of situations? And sorry, this is something that makes me really annoyed when I read headlines like this. And just yesterday, I was also finishing an article that I'm writing about the metaverse for the World Financial Review Journal. And the headlines was when this woman was assaulted, rather her avatar was assaulted in Horizon venues. The first reaction was Meta was allegedly claimed that the user didn't know how to use the space correctly. So we are basically seeing issues of victim blaming and victim shaming also in the metaverse. Yeah. However, having said that, Meta has started to put into place something called the safe zone. So when you go into the metaverse, you can activate the safe zone where you have like a boundary around your avatar for like a 2 feet boundary, so people cannot come close to you, right? That's one. That deals with the physical space of the avatar. While I applaud that, it doesn't stop another avatar from standing 3 feet away from you and shouting hate speech or making extremely lewd comments that are comments that amount to sexual harassment. So the problem doesn't go away, right? But there are measures to protect them from the so-called haptic physicalities of assault, right? But is this enough? Yeah. So yeah, when we think about our laws applying in the metaverse, these are just this is just only one of the issues that we can think about. What about two avatars? Let's say Richard, you and Darren in the metaverse, let's say arguing over a cup of coffee, and then Darren's avatar punches your avatar.
Yeah. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, how do you deal with that? Like, especially when we think about criminal law, assault and battery in criminal law, right? You always need to have actual physical harm, right? I think that's one of the key requirements, actual physical harm. But you're not experiencing harm. Your avatar is, right? Which then brings me to the crazy question of legal personality of avatars. But anyway, that's just me.
There's something for us to explore,
Yeah.
Well, fantastic, Prince. I mean, I think your article will need a longer time to expand on it because I can see you are hurrying through the issues, so I'm very sorry about that.
No, sorry,
yeah, because it is a very wide topic. If I can just throw in some additional points to that to supplement your issues there. In the RWC article, we address an issue about KYC. The know your customers, and also the AMLA issues, whether the metaverse can be used to launder money. Next issues is about the intellectual property. I think IP, how do you protect IP in the metaverse? We also now that we see people are building things like you said, Snoop is doing land in the metaverse. So the issues of ownership, sale and purchase agreements, yada yada, and then of course the topic of Euros is now about interaction between the metaverse users. So I think this area, the topic is super huge, and I don't think even Darren mentioned we may need a metaverse police department, a separate police department to do that. So by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to a conclusion to our webinar, but we are open to questions. Any questions? There's a chat box below. You can see the word chat. Click on it. Put in your queries, and then Pilian, Darren and I, particular Pilian, will try to respond to it. It's a new area, so we may not be able to give a conclusive answer, but it is something we'll try to assist everybody to reach their conclusion. Now, on this point, before we slowly wrap things up, to summarize so far, opinion number one, the metaverse is a virtual world, and at the moment, it seems the only way to visit this virtual world is using some sort of goggles. If I can make it simple, goggle head. But I don't deny that one day we don't need this goggle. We just click on the laptop and we are in the metaverse, or we're looking into the
Possibly.
metaverse.
Yeah.
Then from there, we expanded on your article where you mentioned three potential problems. One, of course, was the issue of data, which was quite extensively mentioned by you. And then we also saw the issue about the interaction between the users, where two avatars are, fighting with each other.
Mhm.
And then there's also the issue of the last one was about, in fact, the first one was the issue of NFTs, the marketplace of this metaverse. But in conclusion, what else do you think will grow, Pin? Because I'm sure these three issues is not exhaustive. Already
it's
can
not-
see RWC article have a different ideas. Yeah. So do you see anything else in times to come?
Yeah, I mean, these are just only the tip of the iceberg, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
There is so much more that we are unable to cover, and so I will share with you when they are published. So I've got two articles coming out which expands further. The conversation article was very basic, so it was very short. I mean short in terms of basic. So there are more issues that I address in my journal articles, which are upcoming. I definitely think that we are going to be looking at some more as we gain more understanding and know more knowledge, and we have more knowledge about how the metaverse operates, right? So I think we will definitely be seeing some new issues, some novel issues, right? That we're going to be faced with. I'm seeing some comments in the chat.
So we have a few questions from Simon of University of Malaya. Simon inquires, is there a possibility for a dark metaverse? Number one, is the technology easily adaptable to create a dark or hidden metaverse? And how could regulators deal with this? Very interesting. Very interesting.
Simon, thank you so much for your question, Simon. I did raise the issue of Silk Road, which is on the dark web. And therefore, yes, I think there is that possibility of the dark metaverse as well. From a technical point of view, I don't know if the technology can be adaptable to create a dark or hidden space, but I would say probably yes. If we can already do that on the internet, we can definitely be able to do this in the metaverse. And how regulators will probably deal with it, I think we have to take from precedents and examples of how we have dealt with through international cooperation for different aspects of crimes on the internet, cyber crimes. So it has to be an international sort of ecosystem for regulators dealing with various aspects of maybe identifiable crimes or identifiable sort of issues in the dark metaverse. So maybe we could have one section dealing with drug trafficking. There might be other regulators or other ecosystems or regulators dealing with human trafficking. There could be another aspect yet also dealing with weapons, guns, firearms, things like that, right? So I think what we can do in terms of regulation is to look at what we have in international treaties and cooperations between countries right now to deal with these kinds of global issues in the dark web and also in reality, and then to see if these can be transposed into the metaverse space.
But you see, Pin's that I think Simon raised a really good point, because
Yeah.
now not just about dark metaverse, which is of course the not so good one, but there could be always be a sports metaverse. There could
Yeah,
always
for
be
sure.
a fashion metaverse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of having a fashion week, certain weeks we may have a fashion metaverse every day.
Yeah.
So where the streets of this metaverse is Louis Vuitton, Chanel, YSL, etc., etc. It's possible actually, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I mean, when you think about it, it absolutely is. It's like I said, right? It's a boundless space right now. There's so
Yeah.
many things that you can do, and it's about having the right resources to create
Mm.
the space and to make it attractive enough that people would actually want to go to this space, you know, to hang out, to play games, for instance. Yeah. I mean, there's been
Yeah.
raves in the
But
metaverse,
yeah,
concerts,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
things like this. Yeah.
But can I ask you, Pins? Because personally, I've not been able to find access into any metaverse yet. And have you managed to actually like walk in a metaverse, or be
Well,
inside a metaverse?
no, I have not
You have,
just
huh?
I have not just yet,
Yeah.
although the resources are available to us already here in Brunel. I'm also
Mm.
part of the Center for Artificial Intelligence here. And we've got a whole range of, we have a lab called the AI Edge Lab. Richard, when you come visit in September, October, I will take you to visit the lab.
Yeah, must
Quite
lah. Must go have a
There's
look at it.
amazing work that we're doing in the lab. Our researchers and professors are doing amazing stuff there in with robotics, with AI and stuff. But anyway, sorry. Yes, we have the equipment and we have the means to get into this space.
Go into a
It's
metaverse. Yeah.
yeah, it's just that
I
I
I
have not.
I
I
I
haven't done
think
it. Yeah.
yeah, I think we do need to go in there. Alexandra already is inquiring, do we need VR glasses to enter the
Yeah.
metaverse? I think the answer
I,
at the moment is yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably is at the moment. Thank you for your question, Alexandra. I think maybe initially when the meta worlds were created, I think they said that you didn't really need it. But I think with the current existing meta worlds, you do need the equipment, the VR equipment, whether it's an Oculus or VR goggles or whether it's some other kind of AR tools, right? And
Yeah.
because these things will give you the experience of actually feeling like you are there in place
Yeah.
of your avatar, which also raises the other question. If so, that means if you don't have these things and you cannot afford these, right, then you can't go into this space lah, basically, right?
I agree.
Having
I agree.
Having said that, like I mentioned earlier, I think these tools will be accessible when we are thinking about different demographics of people. Like we're talking like M40s onwards, right? That should
Mm.
be able to afford this. I think the Oculus currently, which I'm actually thinking of buying as well, is about 400 pounds. It's about
Wow.
400 pounds, which is actually, when you put it in context, an iPhone costs about 700, 800 pounds. So, you know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, yeah, if you're into
Yeah.
it, you know, my piano, I have a stage piano, which I recently bought here. It cost me 300 pounds. You know what I mean? So it's about the context
Yeah.
of what. So when you think about
What's
affordability,
important to you? Mm.
it's what's important to you and whether this might actually be important for you to create this space. Yeah. Or to
Well,
be in this
I do
space.
hope the metaverse don't end up being a rich man or rich people's playground. But
Yeah.
yeah, it should be accessible to all, and then that's where the problem starts, isn't it, Pinch? Once it's accessible to all, and with companies wanting to open shops in the metaverse, as we mentioned earlier, blah blah blah, then you open to a whole new problem, legal problems.
Yeah.
What if you fall down in the
Yeah.
metaverse? Will the thought of occupies
Negligence.
liability, yeah, occupies liability
Occupies
comes in.
liability.
Yeah, and then I see like Alexandra is asking about whether the minors can enter.
Yeah.
Actually the answer now is very hard to stop a
Yes.
minor from putting on that VR and entering a metaverse.
Yeah.
So
Perfect. That's an amazing question, Alexandra, because that's the other thing we think about also when minors use certain websites or the internet. At this moment, it looks like unless the metaverse operators are actually screening the avatars that come through, right? And maybe requiring registration, which I think would be logical of the avatars, which indicate that they are above 18, for instance. Then I think that's what's probably going on right now. But the thing is, like, as with anything, you can lie about your age. As with anything, an avatar that is in the metaverse can be somebody else, just like child predators who pretend to be, you know, a 15-year-old boy talking to a 15-year-old girl on Omegle could actually be a pedophile sitting in his garage in his underpants, and he's like 60 years old or something. Do you know what I mean, right? So there are different there are different ways of masking identities, and that's kind of the fear, Alexandra, right? And whilst we can do all that we can to sort of ensure that minors don't have access to a certain space and use rules relating to access of minors to the internet, for example, as a base, that I think that's a lot of these laws are currently in place in Korea, for instance, where minors cannot access the internet from certain websites from, I think, 10 p.m. onwards until 6 or 7 a.m., right? So if we use these as a base for governance or for, well, to protect minors in this sense, then, you know, I think we have to start somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, start somewhere. Yeah. So okay, I'm going to slowly wrap things up. Darren, would you like to hear? Do you have any inquiries to raise before I summarize Pin's discussion, and then let Pin's have a final say? Any question, Darren?
No questions. I'm just trying to take in everything. It's like a whole new world. The Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
You know. So. Yeah, it's just, I mean, if you're going to ask questions, there's so many questions. You know, like what I mentioned, Meta Police Department, Meta Court, maybe.
Yeah.
Right?
We may have a Meta Court, you know. Yeah, Darren.
Yeah, for all you know, we may have in the future.
I raised the question of Meta Judiciary in my article. Yeah.
Because there's no reason for us. I mean, why can't we have a meta court where we have judges sitting in the meta court, right? The avatar of the judge, he goes up on the bench, and then the avatar of the lawyer goes into the virtual world and argue out the case.
Yeah.
Right? And all the while that same lawyer is just in the house working from home. The same judge is probably just staying home wearing short pants, you know, talking to the lawyers. Nothing wrong with that, isn't it? Yeah, it's actually possible. Yeah, we can actually dispense justice in the metaverse. Yeah. So anyway, there's something. The thing is that because this area is so new, there's so many questions to raise that if we do end up living our lives in the metaverse, I think every aspect of the life need to be governed. There will be some regulation. And we have to bring the laws from the real world into this metaverse world, adapt to it, and maybe even try to change it. But at the same time, we must not forget the possibility that metaverse can be a totally different world, different life, different style. You can fly around, you know, you can do something silly there. You can cook air, you know, you never know. Some things there. In fact, there's a comment from the judge is here. Dato' Marilyn. Hi, Judge.
How boring.
How boring bring existing regimes to the... Yes, so true, Judge. I agree. Yeah, but it's so possible. True. Unfortunately, Then
so true. But Simon is right. It might be a better way to conduct remote trials. Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be quite interesting.
Yeah, I agree. What I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, well said. I mean, nicely said, Darren, about the point. And then to summarize the topic today, ladies and gentlemen, Pinlian has, of course, first explained the metaverse, in short, virtual world, living through avatars. Number two, we have gone through some legal discussions, issues pertaining to the marketplace in NFT, the data protection, the interaction between the two avatars in the metaverse, and to complement that, RWC raised some issues about KYC, intellectual property, human rights in the metaverse, and we have some interesting questions here today. So this is not the end. 100% can't be the end. In fact, this is the beginning of the beginning, and then that's how how tip of the tip we are. There's a huge issue to go in here. Maybe Pins, can you have the I'll give you the honor to wrap it up. Maybe you want to summarize something before we bring this webinar to a conclusion.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Arif, I'm going to be the very boring lawyer and sum it up by saying that I think we're still at the infantile stage in understanding what the metaverse can bring for us. And I think there's so much more that we need to learn about it, which is where I think pacing ourselves and pacing how law can follow technologies is very important. There is something called the Collingridge dilemma, which in the philosophy of science, which is where, you know, technologies are evolving like so super quickly, and the law needs to catch up, but the law needs to also be sort of cautious and be in a position to create certainty, to create certainty and clarity and having that consistent sort of measure, and not wanting to legislate too quickly, because I think a lot of times as lawyers, we do tend to think that everything should be legislated. But so we need to think about this as a balancing exercise. We need to think about some of the regulatory challenges, right? So the best case scenario at the moment is to ensure that the safeguards are in place via user terms and conditions, via more robust oversight mechanisms, and having like moderators maybe in a particular metaverse space. Basically thinking about being respectful and maintaining order, etc., things like that. And of course, what's also important is about making sure that it doesn't just stay in the hands of powerful elites. Yeah. So that's where I will just add on and just conclude at this particular point of time. We don't want to stifle innovation. We want innovations to continue. We want research and development to continue, because there is so much potential for benefits that the metaverse can bring in terms of how we deal with globalization and delivery of services across the world the next time. And we don't want to stop all those good things from happening. Yeah, so just going to end on that, on that note.
Yeah, well said as usual, Pins. And I do foresee, Pins, that one day, and very soon I would think, that we will actually end up having probably a litigation matter and somewhere in the world where something happened in the metaverse, and the conflict is brought to the real world, and it'll be debated in a real court. And I think that's how it's going to start, actually.
Yeah,
that's how it's going to start.
It's already showing little signs of these cracks happening. A lot of the sexual assault cases are already happening right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All it takes in the future is, I mean, I don't want to think about this because it's an awful thing to happen to any person, right? But I'm going to think one day one of these sexual assault victims is going to come forward and put in a test case, and I think that would be very yeah.
But and then from the corporate side of view, when we have some corporate lawyers here, I must say it's going to be a challenge to draft corporate agreements to legislate about metaverse, you know. So I can only imagine if you're a corporate lawyer and you're given a task to do a deal involving a metaverse. How are you going to draft your clauses to deal with the metaverse? That's going to be one challenge. I'm more thinking in my mind, so how Darren and I going to actually deal with that? Anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come. Yeah.
Sale and purchase agreement to buy a piece of land in Snoop first.
That's the first thing. I already selling land in the metaverse. How do I conduct the sale and purchase agreement there? You know. Well, anyway, we will find a solution as we always do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Can I invite everyone here to give a cyber round of applause for Dr. Lau, who actually prepared this for quite some time with us. She was willing to share her article with us. I do recommend that you follow her on LinkedIn, where Pilian will normally share her updates there. And I think this is a topic which is worth following. And it's not often we have a Malaysian contact, especially those here who are from Malaysia, a Malaysian contact directly in a British university, specifically doing research on this area. So I think that will give us, Malaysia, a beautiful connection to knowledge. Yeah, to knowledge. Knowledge is always very important, and we must always expand. And thank you very much, Pin Lian. Anything else you want to say before
No,
we,
no,
we bring this to an end?
except thank you everyone for taking your time out to be here today and to listen me ramble on about our very bleak future in the metaverse. No, I'm just joking, yeah. But also, Richard, importantly, what you've said is that interestingly, a lot of people have actually reached out to me from Brazil, from France, from Hong Kong, Bloomberg, about asking me about the article that I wrote, which actually comes to tell me that there's not enough that's on it. And I've been invited by the current commissioner for the Inter-American Human Rights Commission to present at a constitutional law conference. Yeah, in the US later this year.
Fantastic, yeah. I have submitted your name to the Bar Council's IMLC, our International Law Conference, as you know.
Yeah.
I think I'm not surprised if they invite you to speak about this topic at our IMLC.
I mean, I'm far from an expert, but I think it's interesting to reach out with these issues and, you know, to have dialogues with
to expand dialogues. We need to have more dialogues on this topic. All right. Without further ado, thank you very much. Can I wish our Muslim friends selamat berbuka puasa. I think that we will be breaking fast in about 2 hours time. To the rest of you here, thank you so much for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. Watch out for future RWC webinars. Next month, Darren Lai will be hosting a webinar on climate control, climate change, and environmental laws. He will be discussing about a few topics, particularly what's happening around the globe and how it will affect us in Malaysia. Then in months to come, we will be holding a few more webinars on litigation and also about dispute resolution. So do follow us on our social media to follow our development. Thank you for following our webinars and much obliged for spending your time with us today. I'm going to now first stop the Facebook Live. Goodbye to all of you who are watching on Facebook.